walk down the beach. Me, I try to reenact the Corona commercials, yeah. The little limes and the Coronas. Take a picture of my feet. Oh my goodness. It's all right.
Were the hotels and things with that finance
It was part of the plan, some of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
And we have one.
Well, it's good that they have a tourist economy that they can use
starting off
rather than,
right.
yeah, some other
That's really awesome.
economies that aren't so good.
Those are the jobs.
Yeah.
20 years.
Sure. Sure.
That's what they do. And if you have a group of 16 and you walk in,
Yeah.
Well, especially compared to.
Member Mike test 1, member Mike test 2, test, test, test.
and their parents often, because they are too old to still
Sure.
still. Did you bring any crystal on your
Yeah.
Everybody, after lunch?
Yeah.
Everybody going? Okay. Arrington, no.
Did you? It'll take a Louisiana congressman to make sure that it's a bear. They'll know right off the bat. Yeah.
Where they were from.
I didn't either. I was thinking that on the way over.
Your spot here, sir.
Thank you.
There you go, sir.
California, Texas, New York, Florida, California.
You only have to play on the military card then. With the banks
You're not going to talk French.
banks and windshield. Yeah. That's it. That's it.
I'll stop.
Halfway down.
Halfway
On the left. Past the ladies' room. green, then yellow, then red.
So red is what I want to see.
Yes. If you can keep it on red the entire time, you don't want to look good.
Yes.
That's my goal.
Yeah, so it's good to have a clock so if someone has like wave at you.
Yeah, yeah.
You would go, hey, yes, bounce a little.
Yeah, yeah. Where's the hook?
We got this long.
Yes, yes.
Test.
What'd you do? Okay.
Okay, testing, testing.
Okay, I gotta turn it down.
Member mic, member mic.
Okay, let me do it for you. I can see. Yeah, I've got sound too. That was it.
Test, test. Witness mic 1, witness mic 2, testing, testing. Witness mic 1, 2.
Put our statement out.
What do you have your audience set on first? It's like 80 now. Yeah, down even 6. Down to 80, down to 6. But I can press. All right, you push the first filter. Let me test it now for you. You push the first filter. Well, you already, it looks like they're already. Okay, wait a second. Sometimes I get we're testing the audience. We have to be able to hear. They can't be too loud. We have to just do some testing. Yeah, I know, but we're just doing audio tests. We're not really that much longer. It's fine. Just do the test. We need to test. There's one on that's, I don't know why this one's on.
Member mic test, member mic test 1, member mic test 2. Member mic test 1, member mic test 2.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's get this thing started. Good afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome you all to the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunities hearing today entitled Improving the Quality and Timeliness of GI Bill Processing for Student Veterans. I know we can all agree that the post-9/11 GI Bill is an extremely generous benefit, and for decades, VA's education and training programs have been credited with the successful transition and reacclimation of our returning service members. However, while VA's administration of GI Bill benefits have improved over the years, challenges still exist. Oversight of the GI Bill and how it's administered to the men and women who have served and their families is the job of this subcommittee, and we're here today to discuss ways in which we could improve the processing of these benefits to ensure that they are properly developed and administered so that our veterans receive what they have earned in a timely and accurate manner. Processing of the GI Bill claims in its entirety isn't solely the job of the VA. They have to work with their partners at the Department of Defense to ensure that they're using the right active duty service information when determining GI Bill eligibility and the benefit amount for each individual applying for benefits. This partnership and open communication between the two departments is vital to certify that a beneficiary is receiving their earned benefits in a reasonable time frame and that they are receiving the benefit amount that they earn. Recently, there was an internal audit done by VA where it found that thousands of already processed claims needed to be reviewed again and needed additional information from DoD to verify that the veteran's active duty service time, which was used to process the claim, was accurate and their benefit level was correct. Unfortunately, this did result in some delays in individuals receiving their benefits, which causes a negative impact on the veteran, obviously, or their dependent who is waiting for these earned benefits. Today, I hope we can learn more about this audit and discuss ways to guarantee that there is open communication between the two departments going forward so that future beneficiaries are not impacted by incorrect information being provided to the VA by the DoD. I also look forward to examining a 2015 report done by the Government Accountability Office, which identified $416 million in post-9/11 GI Bill overpayments in fiscal year 2014, affecting approximately 1 in 4 veteran beneficiaries and about 6,000 schools. The GAO made 8 recommendations to the VA to reduce these overpayments going forward and to increase collections of this money. However, many of these recommendations still have not been implemented, and based on the department's written statement, it is unclear when they will be implemented, if ever. I do not place all the blame for these issues on the Education Service or its employees, as it is clear that in many ways it is a matter of lack of IT resources and a need for greater prioritization to be placed on these programs within the VBA. I know that IT resources are tight, but I believe it's time for the VA to prioritize resources for projects that provide direct impact to veterans and not other bureaucratic priorities or projects that are years behind schedule and millions of dollars over budget. While I'm encouraged by the Secretary's decision to modernize the electronic health record, I have to wonder how veterans could have been better served by investing even just a fraction of the $1 billion that has already been spent over the past decade to create a unified health record system between VHA and DoD in modernizing other VA systems like those that process education claims. I hope today members and panelists alike can discuss ways to ensure the education services get the resources and support they need to implement GAO's recommendations and to make the broader improvements necessary to its systems to reduce overpayments and to improve GI Bill processing overall and going forward. By making the appropriate investments, we can bring down the opportunity for overpayments and improve the quality of claims decisions, which will benefit our veterans, the schools, the department, and taxpayers alike. I look forward to hearing from our panelists, and I appreciate everybody being here today. And now I yield to my friend and ranking member, Mr. O'Rourke, for any opening remarks he might have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before the arrival of Dr. Winstrup and Ms. Rice, I thought this was going to be a hearing restricted only to members from Texas. I'm glad to see that we've been joined by others. I don't know that
Big problems, 2 Texans, you got it solved.
Done.
That's how I see it.
But we're glad that you're here as well. I don't think there's much that I can add to the chairman's remarks. and outlining the importance of today's hearing and what we are about to learn from the panel before us. But I do just want to ensure that we are fulfilling our commitments to every veteran who's earned a VA educational benefit, that money is going to its intended use and purpose, and in those instances where it does not, that we do not unduly or unfairly burden the veteran with trying to recoup that money. And we also always, and I know the rest of the committee feels the same way that I do, want to make sure that we are maximizing the taxpayer's dollar, that we are good stewards of that money, and that we are accountable for the money that is spent. And so I'm hopeful that we're going to get answers to some of these outstanding questions raised in the GAO report, raised by the chairman's opening statement, and other questions that the other committee members will have. And lastly, Mr. Chairman, I want to introduce you and the committee to Kathy Yu, who's sitting to my right. She's a new staff director for the minority side of the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee for the VA.
Thank you, Kathy. Welcome to the team, and look forward to working with you. Let's just introduce our guests who are with us today. Joining us is Major General Robert Worley, Director of VA's Education Service, who is accompanied by Mr. Thrower, Acting Information Technology Account Manager for the Benefits Portfolio in the Office of Information Technology, and Ms. Lowe, Director of VA's Debt Management Center. We're also joined by Mr. Hebert, the Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Military Personnel Policy for the U.S. Department of Defense, and he's accompanied by Mr. Breckenridge, Deputy Director of the Defense Manpower Data Center for the U.S. Department of Defense. General Worley, thank you for being here with us today and for your many years of service in uniform with the U.S. Air Force and your service at the VA. You are now recognized for 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member O'Rourke, and other members of the subcommittee. I'm pleased to be here today to discuss the Department of Veterans Affairs education benefit programs and our ongoing efforts to ensure education benefits are administered appropriately and accurately. My testimony will focus on the status of our implementation of the 8 recommendations of the Government Accountability Office report entitled Post 9/11 GI Bill, Additional Actions Needed to Help Reduce Overpayments and Increase Collections. I will also discuss the recent Education Service Internal Quality Review audit, as well as resources provided Education Service to improve GI Bill processing times and outcomes for student veterans. Accompanying me today, as you mentioned, is Mr. Lloyd Thrower from the VA Office of Information Technology. He's the Benefits Portfolio Manager, and Ms. Robbie Lowe, Director of the Debt Management Center for the VA. With respect to the GAO report, VA is committed to addressing overpayments under the Post 9/11 GI Bill. The October 2015 GAO report includes 8 recommendations to improve the administration of the Post 9/11 GI Bill, reduce the occurrence of overpayments, and increase debt collections. VA concurred with these recommendations and has been working to implement them. Of the 8 recommendations, we've completed the required actions and have requested closure of 2. 5 recommendations will be addressed in the re-engineering of Education Service IT solutions currently in progress, and for the remaining recommendation, VA has developed proposed regulatory changes. With respect to the internal audit, Education Service identified a need to improve the overall quality and internal controls of the Post 9/11 GI Bill program due to some trends that we identified with equitable relief and administrative error cases. Education Service requested an audit from VBA's Office of Internal Controls regarding the determination of eligibility percentage levels for Post 9/11 GI Bill beneficiaries. The Office of Internal Controls reviewed a sample of over 78,000 cases. Of those, approximately 14,000 cases were referred to Education Service to review for proper accounting of the initial active duty training and service dates. Education Service was able to quickly resolve approximately 3,000 cases without referring them to the DOD, and contacted DOD to verify the service information on the remaining 11,000 cases. This verification requirement created a hardship on DOD just due to the volume of the cases and limited DOD resources to answer these requests. As we continued to work this situation, the Education Service reevaluated those 11,000 cases to reconfirm that we would in fact need information from DOD, and then we prioritized the cases and reallocated our own resources to focus and process these cases as expeditiously as possible. Additionally, we put in place new procedures for our field claims examiners, and all the claims examiners were retrained to ensure effective, consistent, and standardized claim development with DOD. As of today, there are 466 claims remaining pending a decision, and 22 of those are actually related to current enrollments where payments are involved. On September 24th, now with respect to IT resources, on September 24th, 2012, VA successfully activated end-to-end automation of supplemental claims for the post-9/11 GI Bill benefits through Long-Term Solution, or LTS. This calendar year, an average of over 5,200 claims per day are processed automatically without human intervention. Approximately 85% of all post-9/11 GI Bill supplemental claims are either partially or fully automated. Since transitioning to sustainment, there's been no significant development funding for LTS or other supporting systems. However, there have been 6 minor releases to add small improvements to fix defects and install security enhancements. Additional LTS functionality is needed to further increase efficiency and effectiveness in education claims processing. VA is prioritizing replacement of legacy systems due to the increased cost and risk of maintaining these systems. For example, the Benefits Delivery Network, BDN, is the claims processing, payment, tracking, and disposition system for education programs. It consists of antiquated mainframe systems and is in need of replacement. These and other risks involved in operating in this environment have made the replacement of BDN a high priority for VA. There are a number of other legacy systems that are in need of modernization and further automation. VBA and OIT continue to assess these capabilities for education service. Our goal, as always, is to improve our service to our service members, veterans, and their families. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement, and we look forward to responding to your questions.
Thank you, General Worley. Mr. Haybear, you are now recognized for 5 minutes. Do I have that right? Haybear?
Bear?
Haybear. Okay.
Good
Mr.
French
Haybear,
Cajun
the floor is yours. 5 minutes, sir.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Chairman Arrington, Ranking Member O'Rourke, and esteemed members of the committee. I'm pleased to be before you today with Mark and my colleagues from the VA. The Department of Defense takes our responsibility for ensuring veterans receive their benefits very seriously. Together with our partners from the VA, we work hard to ensure that accurate and timely information is processed and available to determine the veteran's eligibility for education benefits. Since 2003, the Department of Defense has been providing daily updates of electronic personnel records to the VA, from the first day a service member signs in until the day they depart. Direct lines of communication are critical, as you would expect in an enterprise such as ours. Whether it's the regional offices contacting the various service components offices for additional data or information, or between our headquarters, we routinely and almost daily are in contact with respect to the post-9/11 GI Bill. DoD monitors the data reported to the VA, but clearly there is still additional room for improvement in this area. One of the changes that occurred back in 2009 with the implementation of the post-9/11 GI Bill was a requirement to change the Certificate of Release or Discharge from active duty, the DD-214, to incorporate an additional data element. This data element was the initial training end date. The reason I mention it here is that prior to this point, this date had no specific purpose with respect to policy or statute. And so it took us a little while to get it incorporated in the many data systems that we have across the department so that the VA could receive it in a timely fashion. Incorporating it into 214 was an effort to help duplicate some of the data flows that were going to the VA so they'd have instant access to this information. Yet, if a veteran applies for benefits and this information isn't available, we work in an expeditious manner with the VA to try and clear this up and provide this additional information. A second area of focus that we found that was troubling to us is that several periods of qualifying service for veterans were not being included in the records that were being passed to the VA. This primarily dealt with Guard and Reserve members and the systems changes that were occurring and trying to align all the systems up so they could properly receive the information. It stemmed from the elimination of the Reserve Education Assistance Program and their subsequent transfer to the post-9/11 GI Bill. As a result, the VA claims examiners are currently working with the services to ensure all qualifying service is accounted for. We are committed to resolving these cases and as expeditiously as possible. Rest assured, the Department remains committed to taking care of veterans and ensuring the success of the post-9/11 GI Bill, which aids greatly in military recruiting and retention efforts. To address gaps in the current process, my office, along with the Defense Manpower Data Center, will meet with each of the reserve components to develop a plan for significant process improvement on our side of the equation. Going forward, we'll also institute a governance process, a structure that works to make sure that we have quality data being passed to the VA and to other institutions that require personnel data. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement. I thank you and the members of the subcommittee for your continuing support of service members, veterans, survivors, and their family members.
Thank you, Mr. Hebert. I will now yield myself 5 minutes for questions. Mr. Worley, has what Mr. Hebert suggested he would do to improve the coordination and sharing of information, is that going to be sufficient to solve the challenges? And I can imagine there will always be some challenges in coordinating two behemoth bureaucracies, quite frankly, and so I want to be reasonable here, but what are your thoughts about that, and what would you emphasize from your perspective and from VA's perspective needs to happen? IT systems, standardizing process, governance. What do you think, A, about react to what he said, and B, what would you emphasize or add?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just start off by saying that we have a very solid relationship with DOD in this regard. We've had computer matching agreements with them since at least 1990, if not sooner, earlier than that. I think the steps that Mr. Hebert has outlined will very much help as we go forward. We've identified a person in my staff to be my lead, if you will, on working with the DOD, whether it be through a working group or this governance structure. And I think there are a number of areas that we need to focus on with respect to the data sharing itself, the sources, and just basic communications. I would also just point out to you, sir, that just to give you a scope, since this fiscal year, 2017, we've had about 50,000 or so cases that we have requested information from DOD. And the timeliness of their response to us is, for the most part, averages 10 days or less. So it's more issues related to how quickly I think databases get updated and are tapping into those. There may be better ways that our people can tap in more directly to their databases
That seems to me like a more reasonable and common sense solution is to provide access without being able to alter the data and in a way that's secure, obviously, but just to tap into that database. I mean, 10 days, I imagine you could shorten that significantly if you could just tap into it from the VA side without a lot of moving parts on the DOD side. I mean, Am I wrong about that, or that's just an
I
observation?
think that's something we would want to explore with DoD as part of this working group.
Is that something DOD would be willing to consider? I'm just,
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. We already have an application out there that is available to the VA. They can log in and check out all the records of all the military personnel that they would like to on a case-by-case basis. And we're also providing the data feed. The challenge comes in making sure that the records are complete and in a way that's digestible to the VA. And so, but absolutely, we're willing to work with the VA on additional opportunities in that regard.
I have in my notes that VA employees have said that they're still seeing problems receiving needed information from the services in a timely manner. I don't know, that's anecdotal. I don't put a lot of stock in that, quite frankly. I'd like to know what the numbers are. I'd like to know what empirical data from an internal audit or from the GAO. Is there any numbers, hard numbers to measure because there are different sides to this equation, but the component of the DoD coordination, is there empirical data to suggest that that part is inefficient or broken?
Mr. Chairman, we track, and that's where I got the 10 days from. We track from the time we send the request to the DoD to their response. And the range is wide. I mean, it goes from same day to 50 days, but on average, it's about 10 days for them to respond to us with the information that we're asking for, which is typically either character of service, but more often it's Guard and Reserve kinds of information with respect to service dates and the authorities under which Guardsmen and reservists are activated.
Well, I'm going to yield to my colleague. I've got several questions on IT systems front. They may cover it for me. So with that, I yield 5 minutes to the ranking member, Mr. O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Worley, what is the total dollar value of outstanding uncollected overpayments?
I think I would have to defer to my debt management center folks if I could.
It's good with me.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
My system at the Debt Management Center retains the information on debts that veterans owe. For FY16, I show an outstanding balance of $107 million. For FY15, an outstanding balance of $49.5 million.
Are both those numbers overpayment?
They would be monies that veterans or schools owe the VA, yes.
Okay. So sorry, repeat FY16 again for me.
FY16 was $107 million. FY15, $49.5 million. FY14, $31 million. And fiscal year 13 and all prior years is $44 million. And I do want to mention on the...
And for each of those years that you gave us, this is outstanding uncollected overpayment. Now,
Yes.
let me ask you this next question. Where does that money reside? For example, is it with the institution? Is it with the veteran, or do we know?
I do believe I have those details.
And what I'm trying to get at is I want to make sure that if it's with the institution, we're going to the institution to collect the money instead of asking the veteran for the money. But
Yes.
see if you can give me the answer to those.
Yes, sir. For example, in FY16, veterans owe us for books and supplies of $3.7 million. Veterans owe us for housing debts, $47.6 million. For tuition and fees, they owe us $49.1 million. And schools owe us approximately $6.9 million.
And in every instance where you said the veteran owes 3.7, 47.6, 49.1 million, that money has been paid to the veterans. It's in their, it was at one point in their possession. It's not with the institution.
Correct.
Held in the veteran's name. Okay.
Well, that's, VBA makes the determination on who owes the money. And for example, in the area of tuition, whether the school owes the money or the veteran owes it, depends on the reason why. So for example, if the veteran dropped the course, and never attended it, it might be the school that owes it. But again, I would defer that to General Worley to answer that question.
And the way I ask the question is important to me. I want to know where the money resides, perhaps a different question than who owes the money. So it may be legally that the veteran owes that money back, but the money never flowed through to the veteran and is held by the institution for the credit hours that were never served to the veteran. So I don't want the collections agency going to the veteran. I want it going to the institution. And I may not be making myself clear. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. Unfortunately, VBA Education Services determines the debts, and so they would determine whether the veteran owes the money or the school. So I would defer to General Worley.
Okay.
If I could, the way the debts are established, as she mentioned, has to do with when the change is made with respect to their rate of pursuit. So if an individual veteran is taking 12 hours at a school and the term starts, after the start of the term, anything they do with respect to reducing their rate of pursuit, whatever, results in a debt against the veteran because the school was paid on behalf of the veteran.
Okay, but let me stop you there. So let's use that example. Let's say that a veteran signed up for 12 hours. First day of school, they're sitting in 12 hours worth of classes. Second day of school, they say, you know what, for whatever reason, I'm going to take it down to 4 hours. The school was paid for the 12 hours. That money never flowed through to the veteran.
Right.
Whose door will be knocked on for the collection for the balance?
In that case, the veterans.
Even if the money never came to them?
That's correct, sir.
And so how do we change that so that it's the school who actually has the money who pays the money back instead of the veteran?
It presents, the reason it's set up the way it is because the VA does not get in the middle of school refund policies. There are many different refund policies amongst the schools.
Could you get in the middle of it? I mean, you have the leverage. You're paying out hundreds of millions of dollars to these institutions and say a condition for receiving this money is that if the veteran does not go to the classes for which that money was paid, you, the school, are on the line for it. You will pay it back to us. You have the facilities and capacity to make that transaction much more quickly and efficiently than does the individual veterans. And I got to think from a collection standpoint, that's a much more effective way to get that money back than finding thousands of veterans spread out all across the country.
That is the intent of the GAO's recommendation number 8, which we concurred with. That's something that, several of the other ones, is a fairly big lift with respect to the IT changes we need to make in the system. But yes, sir, that's part
Thanks.
of the GAO recommendation.
I've exceeded my time. I yield back to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. O'Rourke. I yield 5 minutes for questions to Mr. Winstrop.
I'd like to yield my time right now to Mr. Bilirakis.
Mr. Bilirakis, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you again for your testimony as well. Mr. Worley, VA should be commended for their efforts to partially automate the supplemental claims through LTS. However, it is my understanding that the processing of original GI Bill claims is not automated and still takes just about as much time as it did back in 2009. What do you see as the impediment to completing the long-term solution, or LTS, and increasing the number of claims that can be processed without human intervention? And then what plans does VA have in place to finish the LTS and finally automate original claims? How do you, again, how much do you think this would cost as well? If you can answer those questions for me, I'd appreciate it.
Congressman Bilirakis, thank you. Just to provide a little input on the timeliness, original claims today are processed in fiscal year to date in 17 in about 21 days. That's actually much better than it was in 2009 when we didn't have automation of any kind. Much better than even in 2012 when it was probably 30-plus days. Supplemental claims with automation on average for all benefit types is running about 6 or 7 days. So we're pretty proud of the improvements that we've made with respect to serving our veterans and timeliness of processing the claims. You're right, original claims are not automated, and I would say it's something that originally when the long-term solution was being developed, that was something that was desired. The focus was put on supplemental claims because that, quite frankly, is 85 or so % of our business, and that was going to be the biggest bang for the buck. As always, it's a resource and priority kind of discussion within the VA, and so we've got business requirements laid out, and I think the estimate that Spaywar gave us, which was the original contractor, they're no longer on contract, and then I'll defer to Mr. Thrower, but was, I think, $30 million to automate original claims and provide some of the other functionalities that we needed.
Thank you. Let me ask this another question. What can this committee do to encourage the Office of Information and Technology to provide additional funding to the Education Service to improve the GI Bill processing? If you can answer that question, I'd appreciate it.
What can
what can this committee do?
This committee
To encourage OI&T, again, to provide additional funding to the Education Service to improve the GI Bill.
May I defer to
process.
my OIT
Yeah.
colleague?
What can we do?
Hello. Well, thank you for the question.
Sure.
I would say that the first thing I would like to be clear is that within OI&T, we established the priorities for what our development efforts in any given year in conjunction with our partners in VBA. We do not do this unilaterally. It is every year a rack and stack of all of the challenges that are facing the administration, each individual administration, and we determine which are the highest priorities. Certainly through 2012, getting LTS up and running was one of our #1 priorities. In the last 2 to 3 years, our priority has been automating the comp and pen process. We are now actually moving to a very different strategy this year with the constraints that we're dealing with funds. We've put a focus in this particular year on managing some very important aspects of our, well, not only focusing on the electronic health records, but also the management and the disposition of quite a few really important legacy systems. Within the benefits space, education systems, well, the Benefits Delivery Network, BDN, is right at the top of that list. We are right now in the process of doing an analysis and reengineering effort on all education systems, looking to see where they stand. We know that we have some legacy system, a legacy environment there that needs to be cleaned up in order to make sure that all of the processes going forward can be uplifted and modernized very effectively. A lot of the things that the GA report has asked for are things that during this process over the next year, year and a half, we're going to be implementing as part of that reengineering effort. We have about, I think, $31 million in the budget for FY18. We have some residual funds that we're devoting to that this year. As I say, we're building the engineering plan and figuring out when we can bring these individual capabilities online now.
Very good. Thank you. I just want, Mr. Chairman, can I have additional 10 seconds?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I introduced House Resolution 1994, the Vocational Education and Training Enhancements for Reintegration Assistance Act, the Veterans Act, this Congress, to address this very issue, and we're funding it for IT, $30 million. My bill would direct the Secretary of VA to make improvements to the information technology system, which would surely improve the quality and timeliness of adjudicating these claims. So, again, without objection, I have a letter I'd like to submit, Mr. Chairman, before the record.
Without objection.
Oh, thank you very much, and it's from the Association of the United States Navy. And they're supporting my bill. So I'd like to discuss that with you. And we've got to fix this. So thank you very much, and I apologize for going over, Mr. Chairman.
No, thank you, Mr. Bilirakis. I now recognize Ms. Rice and give her 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess this question would be for Mr. Worley. Do you think that a wider expansion of the VSOC program at educational institutions could be one supplemental initiative utilized to further the VA's efforts to ensure that education benefits are administered appropriately and accurately for student veterans. We have some VSOCs in our area, but we're still hoping to get more. And I know it's a program that could use some expansion, but would you see that as a benefit?
It's difficult for me to comment on it because I'm not responsible for the VSOC program that falls under the Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Service in VBA. I know there have been many discussions about expanding VSOC, but I'm not the expert on VSOC itself.
Well, I guess I'm wondering if there's any data to show that schools where there are VSOCs, where there is an ability for a student to get some advice and counsel, shows those students have less of a likelihood of getting mixed up in this whole quagmire of, tuition, repay, and all that kind of stuff.
I understand.
But you don't have any
the question. I think we'd have to take that one for the record, ma'am, if we could, and we can get back and answer you.
I'd just be interested to see if that has any.
I would say, just along those lines, as you know, the people that deal directly with our beneficiaries at the schools are the school certifying officials, is kind of our generic term, or veteran certifying officials. And we have extensive training opportunities and resources for them to work with the veterans, make sure they understand the debt potential for dropping classes and those types of things, as well as we work with them on the dual certification piece that was recommended in the GAO report. So there are many opportunities, and we see them as the kind of the front line in terms of providing this kind of information to our veterans. But certainly the VSOC counselors that are on those campuses can provide that kind of important information as well.
So it seems, I've heard a lot about the IT, and what concerns, I'm sure, everyone on this committee is that there's no money for IT. I mean, the budget really it's not there. So we need to be having conversations with Secretary Shulkin and things like that, but it seems to me like a lot of the issues that we're talking about can be rectified by bigger investment in IT. Mr. Worley, I guess you would be the right one for me to talk to about joint services transcripts.
I'm sorry?
Can I talk to you about joint services transcripts?
That's, well, I know a little bit about joint service transcripts. That's really a DOD
so maybe I should ask
kind of issue, but
well, basically,
we try to answer your question.
some members, before they start their outside the military education, have actually gotten credits that are transferable to schools that they plan on attending using GI funds.
Sure.
And it seems to me that we should try to coordinate that along with the payment to schools of the tuition, that we should incorporate some automatic transferal of joint service transcripts, because another avenue for savings could be if the veteran knows themselves that they actually have these credits that would only require them to maybe go for 3 years as opposed to 4, that's significant savings if you add that up down the line. So I would just, I think we have to have a conversation about that to see if.
Yes, ma'am. I would say that's a great point, and I would say in order to be a GI Bill approved school, you have to have policies that assess prior credits wherever they come from.
Right.
So there's been a lot of focus on this in the higher ed community, GI Bill community, if you will, with respect to providing, it's a school decision, essentially. Individual schools have different policies related to what credit they'll accept, but they have to have a policy to review prior credit wherever it comes from and apply that so that our beneficiaries can make more efficient use of their benefits. The joint service transcript is a key part of that, coming out of the service when they transition. They might have other credits that they could get just for military training itself that they go through. So those things are looked at quite significantly. And again, to be a GI Bill approved school, you have to have a policy that says you review those prior credits and give them where appropriate.
So I think if I could just make this one point, Mr. Chairman, I think that if we require schools to have that process, we should make sure they get those credits, the transcripts, right? Otherwise, why are we requiring them to have that evaluation of prior credits? Okay, thank you.
understand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Rice, and I'd like to recognize Mr. Rutherford for 5 minutes of questions. Mr. Rutherford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, if you could, one area that I've heard complaints about in my district is the VA work-study program, and the fact that there's actually no automated or notification system for this program like there is for the GI Bill processing. And that means that these students all have to scan or email all of their documentation. And the lag time in the payment as a result of that is often has some serious impact on these students who depend on that money. Can you discuss the challenges with the work-study program and how we can improve that for our student veterans as well?
Yes, Congressman. The work-study program, as you have indicated, is a great program for student veterans that allow them an opportunity to make some money and do work that relates to veteran service, if you will, at various locations, not just even at schools. The system for paying them is, as you said, it's not automated. It's not part of the long-term solution. Automation, it is computerized, if you will, but yes, to get the hours that are worked, that comes in either by email, by fax, through our Ask a Question on our website, and then is put into our image management system, and then the work is done by a small team to go in and to pay those. We have been looking at this more closely with respect to some of the things that you alluded to on some timeliness problems. First thing we need to do is clean up the way we actually account for the timing of how we process these claims. We have made some different decisions 2 or 3 years ago with respect to the frequency of paying the work-study employees. And again, we work to try to do this as quickly as possible, but we're focusing more on it to ensure the timeliness and that these individuals are paid as quickly as we can.
Just to follow up briefly, are there any plans to make some type of automation available for submission?
It's certainly something we would like to have all these little one standalone systems rolled into the bigger automation. Okay. Absolutely.
Okay. And actually, that's a good segue into my next question. I see where Secretary Shulkin has decided to purchase the DoD, a system that is apparently, an IT system that is apparently congruent with the DoD system, because they use it now. I don't know that has any, is there any potential there for that to help with the GI Bill, post-GI Bill folks, or any tie into the schools at all? Or is it too early to
That has to do with
that?
electronic health records, and it's
it's just the
totally
health
out of my
records?
lane, sir.
Okay, I wasn't sure what the limitations were on it. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to point out one other issue. According to a lot of our veteran military folks, and our resource centers and universities find it almost impossible to get anyone from the VA to answer the phone between the third week of August and mid-September, because everybody is, not that they're not working hard. In fact, they're probably working incredibly hard. That's why they're not answering the phone. Is VA trying to address this? You know, that's a very critical time, obviously. You have all these registrations going on. Is there any plan to try and beef up personnel during that time, or somehow address that workload?
Congressman, if I could get perhaps a little more fidelity on what kinds of, what kinds of calls were being made, I could probably answer that question better. But we have an education liaison representative in each state, or assigned to each state. And sometimes that's a one-deep position for all the institutions in a given state. And they are usually the first resource a school certifying official will go to try to get an answer to a question. So in that regard, yes, we're a bit thin on ELRs, especially, again, during that period of time. Or if there's a new school certifying official, it's a complicated benefit, and there's a lot of nuances to it. So if it's something more generic with respect to the benefits and that kind of thing, we do have the Education Call Center in Muskogee, Oklahoma, and they do a great job. There's sufficient resources there to handle the call volume. I mean, there are issues during the peak times, like the first part of the month or early September for the.
I think this was specifically about the ELRs and their accessibility. So,
Yes,
thank you.
That's a
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Rutherford. And now I'd like to recognize Mr. Correa and give him 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome today. Thank you for your hard work for all of our veterans. Served in the California legislature for a number of years, and unfortunately, the last few years, we've had very disturbing developments with private-for-profit institutions of education. Some have closed down, leaving a lot of students with a lot of debt. And as you know, student debt is the only debt you cannot essentially forgive through bankruptcy. Very unfortunate situation. So my general question to all of you is, can we do anything, should we be doing anything to tighten up as to what educational institutions in this country are eligible to receive the GI revenues, the GI funds from our students? And I say that from two perspectives. Number one, a lot of these institutions promise, full employment or a great job after you graduate, and they're not there. And number two, related to the reimbursement policy. Education can be said to be a business. Taxpayer dollars are being invested in these veterans to educate them. We want to make sure they're getting a good deal. And so I'm trying to figure out how can we better vet these educational institutions to make sure that, for example, policies like automatic reimbursement should the veteran drop out before the semester's over is part of their policy to be part of our system of GI benefits.
Thank you, Congressman Correa. As you know, in order to administer the post-9/11 GI Bill in accordance with the statutory requirements, all types, pretty much very many types of schools are eligible, whether they be public, private, for-profit, private, not-for-profit, vocational schools. I think that's one of the great things about the GI Bill is the breadth and the magnitude of opportunity there for veterans and service members and families to use. I acknowledge your comments about some institutions and some abrupt closures in recent history. And I think, as you're aware, currently, under the current statute, the VA has no authority to either continue paying housing for a little while in a situation like that, or to reinstate entitlement that someone may have lost or perhaps wasted at an institution that closes like that. And again, as you know, many times those credits don't transfer anywhere. So what we've focused on is not trying to identify a good school or a bad school and try to be the judge of that as a department. What we've tried to do is focus on doing everything in our power to create informed consumers and provide information about these things to our veterans who are making these educational decisions for their future. Things like articulation agreements with respect to schools accepting other credits, these debt issues, looking at the graduation rates of a school and those types of things, trying to help our beneficiaries make good decisions up front. As you know, you get 36 months, and that's it.
And that's why, sir, that I think it's important to provide education, and I'm not trying to have a paternalistic government here in terms of telling our vets what to choose and what not to, but some of them, these students, many times are victims of having been sold a basket of goods that actually is not there. It's just a marketing and sales ploy, and ultimately they get hurt as well as the taxpayer. So I know you don't have the legislative authority to delve in this area, but I would ask you to think about coming up with a system to provide additional safeguards for our veterans. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Correa. Now recognize Chairman Winstrup and ask him to, or give him 5 minutes for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to start with you, Mr. Hebert. I'm just curious, over the last several years, what kind of technological improvements have we seen when transitioning information from active duty to VA, especially for Guard and Reserve? I mean, I know 10 years ago when I came home, here's your DD-214, and later I did get a letter from VA saying, hey, you need to check in with us. Is some of this being automated now? Is it, and maybe you both want to address that somewhat, but is it being automated at this point where it kind of goes automatically, or how's that working?
It does. As I mentioned earlier, we do send data flows each day to the VA.
What's in that? What?
If I may, the expert is sitting right to my left.
Works for me.
Thank you, Congressman. Yes, since about 2003, the Department of Defense has maintained a DoD and VA data share with VA so that in real time we update the data that is received from the services. So the Defense Manpower Data Center receives personnel data feeds from the service personnel systems. We put it, we process it through this DoD VA data share, and in real time update those records in what's called VADR, or the VA DoD information.
What's in that data?
It is the service personnel record for all the benefits, including the education benefits that are required for VA. So as soon as we get the first day of a service member's personnel record that is available, that is transitioned to VA. And then we continuously update it until they separate or retire from the service.
And does the troop get access to that data themselves? Is that something they can see, print out? When you talk about benefits especially, is that something that's accessible for them?
The veteran?
Sure.
The veterans do not have direct access to it, but they do have access to it through the systems which are used by VA and within the Department of Defense, the service members as well. There is a second system which does provide direct access to their online service record, the DPRIS system. So they can also see their online service record as well, both during service and after they've left the service. And that's an actual image system which has been provided since that same time period.
So what's the process for Guard and Reserve who go active for a year and then they're going home? Are they aware of what's going over to VA? I mean, how informed are they? I'm just speaking for me, I was kind of lost, right, until I got a letter from VA, saying, come in and get your physical.
I think depending on the seniority of the service member, they have varying degrees of education on exactly how much we interchange with the VA. I think most people are not cognizant of it. I think the key, particularly with the Guard and Reserve, is after they complete their deployment, getting back, or mobilization, they get back and getting that updated in the record typically is not something they're very urgently pursuing. right?
Agreed.
I want to get back with mom and the kids, and I want to get reacclimated with my unit and my family, and so sometimes there's a delay there. It required some service member intervention. We can do a lot of things on our own, but they need to validate it so that we can attribute that service to them. But the largest problem, at least at this point in time that we've identified, is the handoff of the data between all the systems and being able to transition the data in a way that each system, all the way into the VA systems, can recognize and have the completeness that they need in order to make that eligibility decision. And that's where we're going to focus our efforts in the future, is because if we can get the right data to the VA such that it doesn't require manual intervention, then they won't have to ask DOD for the data. And the smaller that population, well, the quicker we can respond to those requests, because we've now whittled down the number of requests that we're getting for manual intervention, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I appreciate that goal, and thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And now I want to recognize Mr. Takano and give him 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is for Mr. Worley. Regarding the GAO recommendation that the VA send out more emails or use e-benefits to communicate with veterans in addition to snail mail, it just seems like that's common sense. These days, people change their mailing addresses a lot more often than their emails. And it's just, I think, a better way to reach people by email in order to communicate about important information. So I'm glad that the VA is trying to implement supplemental email communication. But I understand for non-debt collection purposes, the VBA, or the Veterans Benefit Administration, does not have to use snail mail at all. That, in fact, VBA conducted a study that found using electronic communication would save a certain amount of money over a 5-year period if it replaced snail mail. Do you know how much money the study found electronic communication would save? I mean, is that number something that you know?
I don't have that number at my fingerprints, or available at my fingertips, not my fingerprints, Congressman. But no, we concur with that recommendation, and I think enterprise-wide in VA, we're moving in that direction. We didn't always require an email address on applications for GI Bill. That changed a couple of years ago, but nevertheless, our systems are not set up to do that easily. With respect to some of the closures and some of the schools where there have been negative impacts to veterans, we have been able to go and collect an email address that typically gets at a large portion of the students and try to communicate with them proactively that way. But for regular mail, yes, our notifications need to be in writing. It can be electronic, and we are, IT and the enterprise in VA is working toward that.
Well, I understand that fixing these problems at the VA, like any other problem at the agency, is going to require dedication and creativity in the budget-constrained environment in which we find ourselves. And nothing's going to get better if the agency continues to do things like conduct studies, but then just put them in a drawer someplace and not try to do anything productive with the study. So I'd like to see the VA commit to revisiting the results of this study and potential implementation plans. And I hope you will provide a report back to the committee, because you've already done a study. It already showed you already have other parts of. You want to respond? Go ahead.
Yes, I'd just like to add that for the Debt Management Center, 38 CFR 1.911 states that we provided in writing, and notification is sufficient when sent by ordinary mail directed to the debtor's last known address and not returned as undeliverable by postal authorities. So to make email dreams come true, we would need help.
Yeah, but here I was asking about non-debt communication.
Oh, just non-debt communication?
Well, yeah. I mean,
Okay, I misunderstood.
I understand that non-debt communication for purposes at the VBA does not have to use snail mail. So I understand that in debt collection you have a different level of standard there, but it seems to me that if we're trying to facilitate communication with our veterans, that that we have at least your own study. I know a previous existing study has shown that there is a savings to be had, and you know, I just think I would hope that you would commit yourselves to moving down that path and then report back to this committee, you know, your results. Let me just yield back. Yeah.
We'll make sure and follow up on that. I think that's a good point. I think it's a great point, actually. I will yield any more time that my colleague, Mr. O'Rourke, needs for further comments and questions.
Just one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question, General Worley. I think there are a lot of bigger questions that were raised that I think you're either coming back to us on, or we may need to talk to the Secretary about, especially some really good questions about IT integration with DOD. And we know every service member and every veteran comes through DOD, and we want those systems to work more closely, as they will on the health record sharing side, thanks to the decision Secretary Shulkin made there. And correct me if I'm wrong, I understand that one of the things that you are working on to make it clearer to veterans about their obligation is including a line or a paragraph in the letter that goes out to veterans with their award, saying you're responsible for the difference if you drop classes, and that apparently took a year to approve that language, and that language is still not in the letters that are going out, and we hope, and this again is my understanding, you correct me if I'm wrong, that the VA is going to be able to get that in place by August, which is obviously cutting it really close for this next school year. Correct me if I have the wrong impression, or explain to me why it takes that long to do that, and whether or not we'll be able to get that information, important information, out to veterans before the start of this next school year.
The award letters have, for a long time, prior to even, I think, the GAO report, had a bold box in it that says you are responsible for any debt created with respect to changes in your rate of pursuit, or words to that effect. I think what the GAO is trying to do, a couple of things with respect to their recommendations related to letters, whether they be award letters, debt letters, or whatever, is to give our beneficiaries the total picture in one place, why the debt was established in the case of a debt, and how to pay it back. With respect to award letters, it's something that everybody gets every time they enroll and a certification goes through, so it's a good means, we'll get to the electronic eventually, to communicate that kind of thing and with respect to the debt. So what they want us to do is put more information in the letter related to that debt. Related to the potential for debt, incurring debt. So there is more now in those letters. It's more complicated, and I could ask Mr. Thrower to maybe give more detail, but it's not a Word document that we can just go in and change a few lines and hit save. These are letters that are generated as part of the long-term solution. They have information in them, data in them that relates to calculations and a whole set of things. So it's a non-trivial event to try to make significant changes in these letters. Should it take a year and a half? No, sir, it shouldn't. But nevertheless, it's more complicated than it looks on the surface.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you addressing it, and I don't know if I have the answer or you can give the answer that we're looking for. And I think one of the challenges we have, and it's not the fault of present company, but when we have these ancient IT systems, we can just keep saying, well, we've got this ancient IT system, and it's really hard to update this stuff. So is a year a really long time? I don't know. I mean, maybe the system's so old it takes a year to do this. It's just hard for us to hold you accountable, hard for veterans to hold us accountable when we can fall back on that excuse. And I share the concern raised by others, including Ms. Rice, that we're not seeing the investment in those systems. I mean, tell us what I think a really good conversation would be, hey, Beto, quit banging on me for not being able to get this stuff done quickly enough. We're on an old system. What I need you as a member of Congress to do is authorize X and then have the appropriators appropriate the money for X so that we can finally get this done. I'd love to have that conversation so that my successor is not here in 4 years having the same conversation with you or your successor. So, an open request to you and to the Secretary to tell us what you need as an investment to once and for all fix the IT system so that that is no longer an excuse. That'd be my request. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing.
Thank you, Mr. O'Rourke. I'm going to yield myself 5 minutes for additional comments and take off on what you said. I couldn't agree more. And so let me start probably where I should have from the outset. General, what is a goal? What is a good and reasonable goal for a time frame? You mentioned 21 days to process original claims. You're down to 6 days on supplemental. What's a good goal on the original claim side?
Mr. Chairman, my goal would be to model it similar to loan guarantee. An individual goes into e-benefits, or perhaps in the future vets.gov, loads in their information and hits send, submit, and within a few seconds they get back a certificate of eligibility. That would be my dream, so that it would be instantaneous. I mean, I think that's, that would take a lot, but that's the future. No one is complaining to us right now, however, about 21 days, other than the situations you mentioned where there are longer delays because of whatever situation on a subset of the claims. So it's hard to know. What do the veterans want? We've improved timeliness over time. We're not getting a lot of complaints except, again, unique situations. And the supplemental claims, again, which is 80–85% of what we do, are being processed right through the system very, very quickly.
Would my understanding is this LTS was being implemented, and then there was a shift in priorities, and so it wasn't fully implemented, so we didn't realize the full value of that IT solution. Is that a fair assessment, or?
I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, we again, when you have limited resources, you focus on where you get the biggest bang for the buck.
Sure.
And at the time, it was supplemental claims and all that went before that. There were 6 major releases starting from March of 2010 till September of 2012 to get us to where we are. And I think I would, as we're talking about antiquated systems, I would maybe defend LTS as one of the more recent and effective systems. I mean, I don't know what other business line can make the claim that half of their claims get processed untouched by human hands based on a complicated benefit and the rules-based system that we have. So LTS, when that went into effect in 2012, was truly a game changer in terms of timeliness and service to our beneficiaries. Was there more we wanted to do? Absolutely. I mean, there's some small subset of supplemental claims we don't automate today, and then the original claims. But original claims are 10 to 15% of what we do. Obviously, that's a critical stage in the process because we're determining their eligibility level and all of that, and it's a little more complicated because we need to know service data and those types of things. But that is very much something that can be automated, and that's our next big priority, I'd say, after BDN.
So what specifically, and this may be Mr. Thrower, in your bailiwick, but I'm happy to have the general comment as well, but what specifically, it does sound like LTS did a tremendous job in improving the timeliness of the process, processing these claims, but what else, if you had the money, what would you do to further expedite that, or to cut the 21 days into 6 days, or cut it in half to 10 or 11 days?
Let me try to answer it this way. As I'm have been working with the engineering team to sort of understand the landscape of the challenge we have ahead of us, our first challenge really is to retire the Benefits Delivery Network, BDN. That will eliminate a 50-year-old system that is very risky in terms of its technology underneath the hood. It is tied into all of the various, particularly into the education platforms. A lot of that retirement, which we will be doing over 2018, will actually take many of the benefits that things that we've done with Chapter 30 and make them available for all the other chapters. Will give us better consistency across the board. It will actually close off a couple of these GAO recommendations. For instance, the one about the monthly certifications. We'll be able to manage certain things in that, but it will give us a platform that will be much, much simpler for us to be able to move forward and add on additional capabilities going forward. So our sense is that right now for us, it's a timing issue. Now that we have the priority, the Secretary's established a priority that education is sort of the area within the benefits portfolio that is the priority now. Starting with BDN, let's get the platform up to a certain level in this year, and then we can start layering new capabilities that won't just be available for one chapter or for one subset of veterans, but it will be, as we layer these things on, they'll be available for everyone.
Okay. See, if I recall, you said 10 days on average for DOD to share information when requested. Was that
That's correct,
right?
Mr. Chairman,
So
that's correct.
would you guys work together and report back on being able to just integrate the system to where they can access that information without having to pick up the phone and whatever other manual steps that would need to be taken, and just access that information as part of their process, as long, again, as it meets the security requirements and they can't change the information. I mean, you would know what you would need to feel comfortable in doing that. But would you guys work together and give us tell us if you can do it, and if you can't do it, please give us a good reason why you can't. That right there is several days. So does that seem like a reasonable thing to do? And does it seem like something that you could easily attainable between the two agencies? I'm talking to Mr. Hebert.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Chairman, yes.
Sorry.
Absolutely. We'll work.
It's hard to see my eyes from.
Sure, no problem.
And it's not that there isn't any of that right now. As he mentioned, the first thing a claims examiner does is go into the DPRIS system, the Defense Personnel System, and then VIS, the system by which we access the VADER, the DoD system. But the question is the quality of that data, and then are there other accesses or things that might be able to expedite the process?
Okay, fair point. Okay, well, any questions? Anybody else on the committee have, Ms. Rice, you have any other further questions or comments? Well, I want to thank the panelists today for coming, and appreciate your time and your thoughtful responses to our questions. I now ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material. Without objection, so ordered. This hearing is now adjourned. Hey, you too.
Adios.
All right.
Be good.
Brother. How you doing? Good to see you.